So a minute ago, you were talking about, watching film and your coach is giving feedback on the individual like line and team level.
Mm.
How can you got any advice for kind of in the business world, how a leader or manager can kind of do that and monitor? And actually, because it's really easy when you're in sports, right? You got a camera set up, and you can really easy go in slow
Mhm.
motion and be like, "Hey, look, you missed a tackle here. You should have passed there." It's really easy to pick it apart. You got any
Yeah.
advice and tips to do that kind of in the professional world that doesn't really come across as micromanaging?
I'll tell you, you asked some really good questions, man. That's how I know you're going to have a really good podcast, the two of you. Like, it's a very practical. And if I couldn't answer this question, then what good would this stuff be, right? So you ask a very good question. Let's relate it to it. So I'll give you a couple of them. The first one is, um, so I do it. I'll share my own experience. So when I go on the road and I go and do a workshop with a group, or I go and I do a speaking engagement, I have somebody come there and record it. Some of that I use for content, but a lot of it I use to go back and I watch myself. A lot of people don't like to do that, but it is something I like to do because I'm used to that film in game mode. And I had to get developed into that. It wasn't something I always did. But I go back and I watch it and I look for things that can improve and make me better, because we oftentimes want to get some distance of it. So one way I see companies and organizations do it is they frame it and a lot of times after a project they usually go back through and they say, okay, let's do a review of this project, how it went, right?
Yeah,
So you guys are familiar with that.
like
Those are
post-mortem
typically
meeting.
like, hey, yeah, Portsmouth. Exactly. Well, you've said it for me right there. The literal title of the meeting makes everybody not want to give two you know what's about it. So yeah, right, you're done with it. Why would you want to go back and look at it? But I can tell you the type of leadership I'm talking about is where we see other people go one direction and we go the other. So when everybody else says, I don't want to do that, that looks uncomfortable, why would I want to look at it? Then I know I'm in the right spot and I should be doing something, because real tough leadership, that top-notch leadership, nobody else is doing. So when they go running, you go that way because that's where it's at. So I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do it, yada, 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 a million excuses. I tell them, you sit down there and we talk about it, right? And you frame it out there a little bit. You have to go back and do the feedback just like we talked about. We go back and we talk about it individually with guys. We talk about it at a team level, and then we talk about it on project level. And we go back and we look at things like communication, and it's partnered with sort of how you started. I know a lot of times you start a project, teams will get together. How do we want to communicate on this project? How do we want to handle challenges? How do we want to handle disagreements? How do we want to handle decision making? And so you have this punch list of how do we want to operate as a unit. So then you come back at the end and you say, how did we measure up against the way we wanted to play today, or the way we wanted to play on this project? Did we meet our things? Well, what was our strategy? Well, we were going to, leverage, the long pass on the right side of the field. Did we adequately use our weapons? Did we use our timing right? So you think of it much like that, right? Think of yourself as a team in your position. Put yourself in that mode and say, if this was our match, if this was our game, let's honestly grade ourselves as individuals. How did we do against our strategy? How did we do it, like our time, our labor, all that stuff? And you just talk through it like that. So that's one way I would say do the game film. Another way is that I think performance reviews are a little, uh, we've got to reimagine and reinvent performance reviews, because much like that post-mortem, like tag, which is, it's spot on, man. It's not, I'm not saying good, bad, or I'm just saying it is what it is. Performance reviews are the same thing. They are uncomfortable for both people. Most people want to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible. So they will do as little as they need to, nod their head in agreement, and move on to get things done, right? And one of the reasons why is because we build up everything into this one moment, and we build all that emotion and everything into one moment, and we just expect everything to be done right here in this time. The world needs to be chunked out now. We need to space and stretch things out. That's how you build confidence, is little wins, little wins, little wins. So if instead of doing performance reviews or those longer gaps, little more intervals, right? This actually might gel with some of those new generations who require a little bit more contact with them. So now we're getting to a nexus here between generations, and how do we come together, right? They need a little bit more requirement. We need to get them confident and up to speed a little bit more and be a little bit closer to things. So that's why I would say do a little bit more of game film on a weekly basis. Hey, let's go over this week really quickly. Let's talk about last week from a game film perspective. The last thing I will say about game film is in the way that you train. I train a lot of leaders when it comes to upskilling, like on communication, those kind of soft skills. I use an AI program that I run them through. It's called Skill Gym. It's a digital role play we run them through. One of the feedback loops in that system, which is like hands free, they train themselves in that gym. They go and they work out. It's an augmented replay where after they're done having a real live, a real simulation with a real actor, and they go back and listen to themselves and watch themselves have that conversation without them there. So now they do get game film, but the game film, they can go and they can like choose a selection, look at what they did, read the body language, what would they do different, and then they can move on. So I integrate game film even into the soft skills training that I do in that mental energy component. So it's a good question, man. I hope did that answer it? I think that was pretty
I
good.
think so. Well, the problem with I think a lot of, especially construction industry, but a lot of industries, I think, is everyone's takes everything as micromanaging, right? And so if you don't have a culture of that already built in, right, and you start really trying to like, all right, we're gonna talk about how you did last week. It's like, I just got off my back, like, just let me do my job, right? I don't need you to tell me how I did last week. But the best I've seen is a company I worked for in the past where um, I had it when I hired on. I had until I kind of got my feet under me, but I would sit down every Monday morning with our director of project management and just kind of just recap last week and this week and this was going on, and he kind of helped me get that flow going. He kind of coached me along the way. But they didn't do annual reviews; they did monthly reviews. And I had two different directors I reported to while I was there, and one he was real formal and he had bullet points, right? He had a whole bunch of goals, and that was good. And then another guy, he had basically a blank sheet of paper, and he just like, all right, what do you want to talk about today? And I appreciated that too, because I'm a person that likes to have conversation. I could see in somebody else that just wants a head nod
It's
and
like,
get out
yes.
of there. But it was, and I mean, he was an open book, right? I could ask about anything. We talk about stuff, and how's this? But he had questions in his head, right? Well, how's this relationship going you're having, or how's this going? How's this doing? But you're talking about that, and again, equating to sports. I'm thinking like in baseball, in pro baseball, there's 162 games. If you just looked at film at the end of 162 games, what are you going to get out of it?
What are you going to do? Yeah, exactly.
So if you do it once a year, you're only going to remember the last 5 games, maybe.
And it's so important because I never tell leaders they have to show up every day, all day. But there are moments where you better show up. And that's what I mean, is because the majority, people, you could do 9 out of 10 things right. Most people will remember the one thing you didn't do right. Human nature. Okay. This is just the way it goes. So you could show up as a leader every day bringing donuts and kolaches. But if in that performance review meeting or in that team meeting, you go and you don't back your people, there ain't enough kolaches in the world to save you at that point. You know what I mean? Like, like you got it wrong. Like you're trying to buy with sweets instead of like real leadership here. You've got to show those performance reviews. That is the time you're because they're going to come out of there either thinking I'm staying and I'm going to do what this person says, or what a joke, I'm going to sit here and quiet quit.